Stop. Stop.
الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. So we'll continue this evening in our commentary on the book Muslim Morals and Manners. We're in the section which basically deals with interpersonal relations and how we as Muslims should deal with other people and other groups. And we said how the compilers, they mentioned those individuals and groups, they mentioned them in descending order in terms of priority. And so they mentioned first and foremost the parents, and then after that they mentioned the close relatives, our kinsmen, and then after that they mentioned the husbands and wives, spouses, and then after that they talked about the rights of neighbors. And now we've come to a point where they're going to talk about, or we've been talking about, the rights of Muslims in general, fellow Muslims, and how we're supposed to interact and deal with them. And we said that initially we would use the hadith of Abu Hurairah, collected by Muslim, as a guide. And that's the hadith in which the Prophet ﷺ, he said, حق المسلم المسلم ست إذا لقيته فسلم عليه وإذا دعاك فأجب وإذا استنصحك فانصحه وإذا عطس فحمد الله فشمته وإذا مرض فعد وإذا مات فاتبعه. So in this hadith, the Prophet ﷺ, he said, the rights that one Muslim owes to his fellow Muslim are 6 rights. And he said they are that if you meet him, you should greet him with a salam. And if he invites you, you should accept his invitation. And if he asks for your advice, you should advise him sincerely. And if he sneezes in your presence and praises Allah, then you should make the appropriate dua for him. And if he gets ill, you should visit him during his illness. And if he dies, you should attend his funeral. So we spoke extensively last week about greetings and some of the etiquettes of greetings and some of the rules and regulations associated with greetings. And I just want to, re-emphasize and stress that this greeting of as-salam, it is an ancient greeting, it is a virtuous greeting, and it's incumbent upon Muslims to actively spread this greeting amongst themselves. And it's not proper that they would exchange this greeting for other greetings. And it's not uncommon for Muslims to begin a conversation with hello, what's up, or other such expressions, and there's no mention of salam whatsoever. So for example, in Middle Eastern countries, we might say, for example, marhaba, ahla wa sahla. We would start off a conversation in this way. And in this country, this environment, like I said, hi, bye, hello, what's up, what's going on, whatever. And so we have these expressions that we use to open a conversation, and similar expressions to close a conversation. And it's not uncommon to find Muslims who will interact with other Muslims, and there's no mention of salam, not in the beginning or not in the end. This is not proper yet for them. That we've been given a greeting that if we use it, it's a dua for the other person. And on top of that, it's something for which you'll be rewarded. And how precious will these rewards be on the Day of Judgment when we meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it's something that it doesn't cost us anything. It's something which is not a hardship. It's not something which is difficult. But how often do we exchange this greeting with what? That which is adna, as they say. That which is what? Of less value and less reward. So I just wanted to mention that we need to be keen to spread the salam amongst ourselves. And the Prophet talked about the benefit of that, or one of the benefits of that. He said that you will not enter paradise until you believe, and you will not believe until you love one another. Shall I tell you something which will cause you to what? To love one another. Afshu salam bainakum. Spread the salam amongst yourselves. But with that said, we'll go to the next right, which the Prophet ﷺ, he mentions in the hadith. And that is the right of accepting invitations. Accepting invitations. So if you notice, the Prophet ﷺ, he said, وَإِذَا دَعَاكَ فَأَجِبْ. If he invites you, accept his invitation. Now the wording of the hadith is very general. It doesn't specify invited to what. It's very general. And so the scholars, they differed about what exactly are we being invited to that we have to, and do we have to respond or not. So An-Nawawi rahimahullah ta'ala, he said when the Prophet said إِذَا دَعَاكَ فَأَجِبْ, he meant to a walima, to a wedding reception. He didn't mean any and every invitation, but he meant specifically the walima. Or some gathering like a walima where there's going to be food that is served. So either a walima or something which is similar to a walima where there's going to be food that is served. That's what the Prophet meant when he said, إِذَا دَعَاكَ فَأَجِبْ. If he invites you, then accept his invitation. But some scholars said because the Prophet made it general, then it includes anything that could be considered an invitation. Even if you invite someone to what? To assist you in some need. If you invite someone to assist you in some need, even that is included in what? إِذَا دَعَاكَ فَأَجِبْ. Person says, hey man, I got to go down and pick up a truck to move. And if I go in my car and I get the truck, I won't have any way to get the truck back. Can you ride with me? Drive my car and I'll take the truck. So here he's inviting you to help him what? To fulfill a need that he has. And some of the scholars, they said this is included in the statement of the Prophet when he said, إِذَا دَعَاكَ فَأَجِبْ. If he invites you to help him do something, then also what? Respond and answer his invitation. طيب. Now the question comes, وَعَلَيْكُمْ السَّلَامُ وَرَحْمَةُ اللَّهِ وَبَرَكَاتُهُ. Now the question comes, this accepting, or this, accepting the invitation, is it wajib or mustahab? Is it something that we have to do, or something which we're highly encouraged to do, but if we don't do it, we won't be sinful? A number of the scholars, like An-Nawawi rahimahullah ta'ala, Al-Qadi Iyad, Ibn Qudama, Ibn Abdul Barr, they said that the scholars are unanimously agreed, they have consensus, they have ijma', that accepting a wedding invitation is wajib. So somebody invites you to a walima, a wedding reception, it's mandatory unless that wedding reception contains something which is haram. Unless it contains, you have reason to believe there's going to be some impermissible activity, some impermissible items, some impermissible behavior, then they say that you have to attend. You have to go. So let's say, for example, these people are going to have a wedding reception and you know there's going to be wine that's served. Yeah, you don't have to go. You know there's going to be music and dancing. There's going to be mixing between men and women. Then yeah, you don't have to show up. But if you're certain that there's not going to be any of that, or you strongly believe there's not going to be any of that, then you're expected to what? To respond to that invitation. And they say that this ijma', this unanimous agreement, is supported by a number of a hadith. So for example, we have the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam, collected by Bukhari and Muslim, on the authority of Ibn Umar, in which he said, إِذَا دُوِيَ أَحَدُكُمْ إِلَى وَلِيمَةٍ فَلْيَأْتِهَا. He said, if one of you is invited to a walima, to a wedding reception, then let him what? Let him attend. This is a command from the Prophet ﷺ, and a command from the Prophet indicates what? Al-wujub, indicates requirement. That's mandatory. We also have the hadith in which the Prophet ﷺ, he said, the worst food is the food of a wedding reception, walima, wherein those who would have liked to have attended were prevented. They weren't invited. They would have liked to have come. They would have loved to have been invited, but they were what? They were left off the guest list. And those, conversely, who had no interest in attending were invited. So you have some people who, they don't want to come, they're not interested in coming, but the people want them to come because they have status, they have whatever, and so they insisted that they come. So people who don't want to come are invited, and people who would love to come are excluded. And then he said, وَمَنْ لَمْ يُجِبْ الدَّعْوَةِ فَقَدْ عَصَى اللَّهَ وَرَسُولَهُ. And he said, and whoever does not accept the invitation and attend, wa alaykum as-salam wa rahmatullah, then he has disobeyed Allah and His Messenger. So these two hadith let us know that attending a walima, a wedding reception, is obligatory. طيب. What about other occasions? Let's say, for example, that a brother or a sister has invited us to their home for a tea party, okay? Or for a dinner, or something like that. The scholars of Islam, they say that this type of invitation, it's highly recommended that you attend, but not required. So if you excuse yourself because I'm busy that night, or because I have other plans, or whatever, then there would be no problem with that. You would be excused. طيب. The next issue is the effect of inviting versus excluding. Something that a Muslim has to think about when we start inviting people and excluding people from being invited. It's not uncommon, ya ikhwani, that when we have like community events, or they're supposed to be community events, it's not uncommon that certain people, certain cliques, certain whatever, they take ownership of these events. And they start to what? Invite people that they want to invite, and exclude people that they don't want to what? Invite. And so you have the people who are desirable and the people who are considered, wa alaikum assalam, who are considered undesirable. You follow that? People create these lists in their mind. Desirable, undesirable. And if you're on the undesirable list, then they purposely don't mention it to you. So you have people, for example, who are, after Jummah, for example, they're going around and they're seeking certain people out and they're pulling them to the side to say, hey, we're going to get together at such and such park tomorrow. And they're excluding what? Other people. And the Prophet ﷺ, he's teaching us in this hadith that it's important to what? To invite, and it's important to what? To include, and it's important to accept the invitation because of what it fosters, right? So when people get invited, what happens? They feel included. They feel like they're part of what? Of a community. They feel desirable. They associate with others. And that association with people who share their faith, it fills them with what? With faith. It strengthens their faith, right? Conversely, when people are excluded and people are talking around them and they come to find out, they come to know, then they feel what? They feel that they are undesirable, and they tend to do what? They tend to disassociate, disconnect themselves from the community because they feel what? Unwanted. And when that happens, that has the opposite effect on what? On their faith. And it's not uncommon for you to hear, for example, we'll use the sisters because this is a lot more common amongst them. It's not uncommon for you to hear a sister say, for example, that I don't want to hang around the Muslims. I don't want to come to the community. They might even go so far as to say, I'd rather be a Christian again. And this is not uncommon, ya ikhwan. I'd rather be a Christian because why? The Christians don't do this. The Christians are very what? Social. And they always invite. And they always include. And that kind of thing. And so we have to think about the effect of our behavior and the effect of these invitations and the refusal to offer an invitation that it can have on what? On other Muslims. Something to think about. But another issue related to the concept of invitations is, what if a person is invited and they are fasting? What if they're invited and they're fasting? And Imam Muslim has collected the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ on authority of Abu Hurairah, in which the Prophet ﷺ, he said, إِذَا دُوِيَ أَحَدُكُمْ فَلْيَجِبْ فَلْيُجِبْ فَإِنْ كَانَ صَائِمًا فَلْيُصَلِّ وَإِنْ كَانَ مُفْطِرًا فَلْيَطْعَمْ. He said, if one of you is invited, then let him accept the invitation. Any one of you is invited to a walima, accept the invitation. If he is fasting, then let him what? Attend and offer a prayer. And if he is not fasting, then let him what? Partake of the food. So, we also have the statement of Nafi' ibn Umar, who said that Umar كان يأتي الدعوة في العرس وغير العرس وهو صائم. Abd'Llah ibn Umar used to accept invitations to wedding parties and other occasions, even if he was fasting. So what does that tell you? First and foremost, fasting is not an excuse not to accept an invitation. Somebody invites you, don't say, I'm fasting, so I won't come. No, somebody invites you, and they say, we have a dinner party at 5:30, and you're not going to break fast until 7. Turn up. Turn up. Yeah, turn up. Fasting is not an excuse not to what? Not to turn up. You turn up. You show up. The second thing is that this shows you that the wisdom behind inviting people is not just to what? Just to feed them or to be fed. That the purpose of the invitation is to what? To foster what? To foster brotherhood and to foster sisterhood, to foster affinity, and to strengthen the ties that bind the believers. And this is achieved whether he what? He eats or he doesn't eat. But if I invite you, and you say, I'm fasting, I won't be there. That achieves what? What does that bring about? Hatred. The opposite. It almost seems like you don't want to what? You don't want to come. I'm inviting you because I want your presence. I want you to be there. You know, I just want your face in the place. And you know, I'm fasting, I won't be there. That makes the first person feel like what? You're not interested. And my invitation is not desired, or it's not, you're not interested in my invitation. And we have to be sensitive to this type of thing, the effect that something like that can have. I'll turn up. And then when I turn up and I don't eat, I'll explain. I'm fasting, but I wanted to what? Accept your invitation the way the Prophet told us to accept it. And at the end of the day, it's not about what? Me stuffing my face. It's about what? Me being with you and us enjoying some time together. واضح يا إخوان؟ طيب. With that said, we'll move now to the third right the Prophet mentioned in this hadith. And that's related to giving advice. Atfadallah.
What about the one hadith Nabi Nabi has some Sahaba and one of them was fasting. And Nabi asked him to break his fast. So what are you saying about that?
Well, you know, if it's a voluntary fast, yeah, then the person's Amirul Nafsi. You know, he's in charge of himself. He can break it, but he doesn't have to. And this kind of hadith, the Prophet, well, the Prophet may have said it in a way which was imperative, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's required. He has to break it. The Prophet may have just really wanted, as his host, really wanted him to what? To break it, and he complied with the Prophet's instruction. And there's no harm if he does that, because again, if the person is fasting a voluntary fast, then he's in charge of himself. He can continue fasting, or he can break it at any time during the day. But he doesn't have to break it. You know, he can actually go to attend, and that's indicated by the hadith. He said if he's fasting, he didn't say فَلْيُفْتِرْ, then let him break. He said what? فَلْيُصَلِّ. Continue your fast and what? And offer a prayer. Okay? So he has that option, but at the same time, he doesn't use fasting as an excuse not to turn up. But, all right. So the next right that the Prophet mentioned was the right of giving advice, giving sincere advice. So he said, وَإِذَا اسْتَنْصَحَكَ فَانْصَحْهُ. If he seeks your advice, then advise him sincerely. And so the first point I want to mention as it relates to this right and this very important point of our interactions is I want to mention some guidelines for the nasih, the advisor, guidelines for him, guidelines that he has to observe, and those guidelines are derived from the meanings of the word nasiha in Arabic or in language, linguistically. So the first meaning of the word nasiha in Arabic is iradat al-khair lil-mansuh lah. It's that you desire and seek to bring about good for the one you advise. That's the first meaning of a nasiha. That's the first thing that it means in the language. And al-Asfahani, he said in his book Al-Mufradat, he said, "An-nush, good advice, is seeking to do or say that which will benefit one's companion. As Allah said on the tongue of Salih, He said, "Nasahtu lakum, walakin la tuhibbuna an-nasihin." He says, "I wish well for you, but you all do not like the well-wishers." I say what I say because what? It's going to benefit you. And wallahi, ikhwan, if a person comes to us and they tell us, for example, that, I'll give you an example. Let's say a Muslim comes to another Muslim, and that Muslim's garment is very long. It's like dragging the ground. And Islamically, that's not acceptable. To the point the Prophet said, whatever is below the ankles is in the hellfire. So when that brother comes to that other brother and says, "Ya akhi, you're dragging your thobe, you should raise your garment," I'm going to ask you honestly, what benefit? What's in it for him? You guys follow me? The one who says it, what's in it for him? What is he going to gain? Yeah, he's going to get reward from Allah. I get that. But I'm saying, what's in it for him? So when he tells the other person, Habib, when he tells the other person, right? He says it because what? He wants good for that person. And it hurts him that person might be what? Hurt. That some harm might come to them because they're not observing this. So one of the key things is that what motivates him to open his mouth is that this is harmful for you. This thing you're doing, the Prophet said, whatever's beneath the ankles is in the fire. That's serious. That's not something to take lightly. Anytime the fire is mentioned, that's something you take seriously. So the person, when he says what he says, what motivates him? I just want good for you. I don't want any harm to come to you. So that's the first thing. The second meaning is a tasfiyah. A tasfiyah. Which means that you refine something and you remove what? You remove anything that what? Makes it impure. Anything that kind of what? Murkies it. You try to get that out of there. Okay? That's another meaning of an-nasiha in the language. So al-Mazari, one of the scholars of Islam, he said, an-nasiha is derived from nasaha. One says, for example, nasahtu al-asal, I have purified the honey. You guys know when you first get honey, it's got what? It's got all that stuff from the wax, the comb, debris, whatever it is, all that's in there. In order for you to what? Eat that honey, you've got to do what? You got to sift that. You got to get all that impurity out of there so you can what? Eat the honey. Make good use of the honey. So this is what the word nasiha comes from. It comes from what? This process of what? Purifying and sifting out the impurities from the honey so it can be what? It's edible. And a thing is considered to have nasaha if it has attained a state of purity. It is also said, nasaha lahu. He has given him nasiha if he was sincere toward and had pure intentions with dealing with him. So what does that basically mean? It means that when you are going to give somebody advice, your heart has to be pure. Pure from what? Pure from what?
Envy?
Could be envy. Could be pride. Could be what? Jealousy. Could be treachery. Treachery. That basically, I'm not going to advise you in a way which I know is what? Harmful. I know this is what? Harmful because I'm jealous of you, or because I have some ill feelings towards you, and so I want to give you advice, which is actually what? It's actually treacherous advice. You guys follow what I'm saying? That it's critical for the one who's going to give advice to purify his heart from treachery. You can't have any treachery in your heart when you give advice. When you give advice. So your heart has to be pure of any what? You can't have, okay, I have ill feelings towards you, and I actually want to harm you, so I pretend to what? To give you nasiha. But actually I give you advice which is what? Which is harmful to you. Like the third thing is, or the third meaning, the final meaning, is islahu shaq fi thawb. The other meaning of nasiha is repairing something which is torn by stitching it. Repairing something which is torn by stitching it. Al-Mazari, he said about this, he said, or perhaps it is derived from an-nush, which means sewing or stitching. And an example of this usage is in the words or the phrase Tawbatun Nasuh. You find this in the Quran. As if sins, they do what? What do sins do to the deen? They rip the deen. They rip the deen. They can rip the deen to what? To shreds. And how do you repair that? By what? By stitching. Stitching it with what? With an-nasiha. Right? Stitching it with what? An-nasiha. So the repentance does what? It repairs those tears in the deen and makes the deen whole again. The same way, when you give nasiha, your brother what? He has some what? He has some tears in his deen. He has some errors. He has some faults. And you want to do what? You want to repair those faults and make his deen whole with what? With your advice, with your nasiha. So these are the three meanings of a nasiha in the language. One is you have to want good for what? The other person. That's part of it. Desiring good for the other person. Number two, purifying your heart from treachery. And number three is what? Wanting to what? To rectify and make things better. You want to make things better. I don't give nasiha to humiliate you and make things worse. I give nasiha to what? To make you better. واضح? طيب. What about the legal meaning of a nasiha? These are all linguistic meanings. What's the legal meaning of a nasiha? An-Nawawi, he said that when the Prophet said, when he seeks his advice, or he seeks your advice, advise him sincerely. He says it means, if he asks for your opinion in a matter, somebody comes to you and asks for your opinion, it's incumbent upon you to advise him honestly. You advise him honestly. So you can't tell him what you think he wants to what? To hear. And you can't mislead him. And you can't withhold information and not give him the necessary information to make what? The right decision. So suppose, right? Suppose a friend of yours, he came and he asked you about a potential sister that he wanted to marry. Okay? Potentially, he wants to marry a woman. And you know something about her. Okay? Something that would influence his decision. So he asks you, and you're like, well, I don't want to say anything. I don't want to expose the sister. I don't want to say anything that would paint her in a bad light. So you say, Alhamdulillah. She's good. Yeah. She's good. Yeah. So you just say something, what, in general, not specific, that leads him in a direction to think, what? She's okay. And he came to you specifically, why? Because nobody knows her the way you know her. You follow me? And you withhold that information. Yeah, she's all right. She's alhamdulillah. Yeah. Right? And you don't give any specifics, and that information leads him to believe what? She's a good sister. But you know she's not. That would be an example of what? Spicy. I'll try. I'm sorry, just a second. طيب. Alright, so al-muhim, the point I'm trying to make is that it's obligatory when the Prophet said advise him sincerely. That means that if you know something and it's going to help the person make the right decision for himself and for his deen, you have to what? You have to say it. You have to say it. And that's part of what? Avoiding treachery and wanting good for the person and trying to what? To make things better. Because if you, for example, if the sister's no good and you give him the impression that she is good and he marries her and she makes him miserable, or they fight all the time, and this bad thing happens, and that bad thing happens, you're partly what? Responsible. Because of your treachery, because of your failure to what? To do what would make things better, or say what would make things better, that you're partly responsible for the misery that he's experiencing. And if you look at the example of the Prophet ﷺ, his desire to cover the faults of the Muslims, and he was keen to cover their faults, didn't prevent him, when he was asked, from saying what? The truth. And what was in the best interest of what? The person asking. So when Fatima bint Qais, she came to the Prophet ﷺ, and she asked him about two men who had proposed to her. The first one was Muawiyah, and the second was Abu Jahl. So she said, "What do you think?" So the Prophet said, "Amma Muawiyah, فَسُؤْلُوكُ لَا مَالَ لَهُ." He said, "As for Muawiyah, he's a poor man; he has no money. And as for Abu Jahl, then he what? He doesn't take his staff off of his shoulder." Which means one of two things. Either he's always on the road, or he's what? Darrab. He's abusive, right? So either way, neither one of these guys is any good. Notice, the Prophet told her what she needs to know to make what? An educated decision about these two men. Then on top of that, he gave her what? Advice about who's good. Inkihi Usama. Okay? Gave her advice about a good man. This man, he wasn't an Arab. And for them, that was like an ape. You know, that's like a step down. But the Prophet said, listen to what I'm telling you. This is the best thing for you. He didn't care about what? About the societal considerations. What will people say? You know, what will people think? He cared about what? What was good for her. And he avoided what? Treachery. Yeah, go with Muawiyah because, you know, he's from a good family. And even though he knows he's what? He's poor. He gave her advice. This is a good man. Marry this guy. And sure enough, after she married him, she said what? Other women were jealous of me because of what? Because of Usama. They envied me because I married Usama. طيب. ثم بعد ذلك, this nasiha, is it wajib or mustahab? Somebody comes to you and asks you for advice. Say, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? Advising the person, if they ask you, it's what? It's wajib. You have to what? Advise them. It's wajib. You have to advise them because the Prophet said, فَانْصَحُوا. He ordered, advise them. So you have to give the advice and you can't withhold the information. ثم بعد ذلك, suppose they come to a group of us. So somebody comes in and says, Ya Jama'ah, oh people in the masjid, what do you guys think about sister so-and-so, Asma? Okay? They had asked all of us. Because she's from the community and that person is from what? From out of town. They're from Chicago or something. And they come, I don't know anything about sisters in Colombia. What do you guys know about Asma? Like, does every one of us have to get into a line and, you know, one by one tell everything we know and the next person tell everything they know? No. It's wajib al-kifaya. It's what? It's wajib on us as what? As a collective. So if one of us goes and tells him what they know, that suffices the whole group and the rest of us are not sinful. طيب. What are the benefits of a nasiha? What are we going to gain from a nasiha? But one thing you're going to benefit a fellow believer. You're going to benefit a fellow believer. And that's definitely what? A fa'idah. A definite benefit. Another thing, you're going to educate the ignorant. One of the ways we learn, ya ikhwan, is not necessarily from coming to a class and sitting and letting someone lecture. One of the best ways, one of the best tools of educating the Muslim Ummah is what? This advice. And that's why Allah emphasized in the Quran and the Prophet emphasized in the Sunnah that advice is one of the best ways that the ignorant can get educated. So for example, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلْتَكُمْ مِنْكُمْ أُمَّةٌ يَدْعُونَ لِلْخَيْرِ. Let there arise of you a group who will call to what is good. وَيَأْمُرُونَ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ وَيَنْهَوْنَ عَنِ الْمُنْكَرِ. They'll enjoin the good and forbid the evil. And he tells us that this ummah is the best ummah. Lish? Just because? No, he says, كُنْتُمْ خَيْرَ أُمَّةٍ أُخْرِجَتْ لِلنَّاسِ. You are the best ummah which has been what? Raised from mankind. تَأْمُرُونَ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ وَتَنْهَوْنَ الْمُنْكَرِ. Because you command the good and you forbid the evil. So one of the best ways that the ignorant can be educated is by what? Those who know educate those who don't know. And how many people actually attend what? The classes. In any community, it's always a small what? Percentage. Look at Jumu'ah. The masjid is what? Bursting at the seams. And you come to the masjid any other day, there's what? Qillah. There's very few people. So these people who come to the masjid just for Jumu'ah, their only opportunity to what? To learn the deen, in most cases, is what they hear on the minbar. But if they step out and they're struggling with something that the imam didn't talk about, and the other Muslims don't give what? An-nasiha, how can that ignorant person come to what? Come to learn. So it's another benefit of a fa'id of a nasiha is when we do what? We're teaching the ignorant by what? Giving a nasiha. But also, it's a way to guide those who have gone astray. To bring them back to what? To the right path. Also, sometimes people know the right thing. Sometimes people know the right thing. But they need to be what? Reminded. They know they're not supposed to be doing this, but they need to be reminded. How are they going to be reminded? They get reminded through what? Through a nasiha. And also one of the greatest fawaid, one of the greatest benefits, is that this is the path of Allah's prophets and messengers. So by doing this, we are following what? In their footsteps. And what better footsteps to follow in? طيب. ثم بعد ذلك, if you notice in the hadith, the Prophet said, إِذَا اسْتَنْصَحَكَ فَانْصَحْهُ. If he seeks your advice, then advise him. So does that mean that we have to wait to be asked? That the person has to seek our advice before we advise them? Is that what the hadith means? If they ask you for advice, advise them. If they don't ask you, mind your own business. That's what the Prophet means in the hadith? طيب, I'm going to ask you a question. You see a guy, let's say they're doing work on the parking lot. They've been doing some digging or whatever, and there's a big hole in the middle of the parking lot. And you see somebody walking toward that hole, and they're not really paying attention to their surroundings. And they're about to fall into that ditch. And they could break their leg, they could injure their arm, anything could happen to them. Is it incumbent upon you as a Muslim to call out to them? If you have to run over to them? If you have to tackle them before they fall in there, is that wajib? Is that incumbent? Why? Because they might hurt themselves, right? But when they hurt themselves, they're going to hurt what? They're going to hurt themselves physically. But if you have someone who's about to hurt themselves spiritually, what's more important? Spiritual harm or physical harm? Spiritual harm. You got people who are doing the opposite of what Allah commands, what the Prophet commands. They are destroying themselves. They're committing sins. Some of them know it, some of them don't know it. And they're about to fall in what? A pit of fire. And you don't think it's incumbent upon us to what? Shout out to them. Hey, hey, you're going in the wrong direction. You're going to fall in the hole. It's incumbent. It's obligatory. And that's why the Prophet said in the other hadith, the hadith of Tamim, he said, ad-din, an-nasiha. Ad-din, an-nasiha, ad-din, an-nasiha. He said religion is sincerity and sincere advice. And he said it 3 times, repeated it. He said, he called it what? The deed, the essence, the core, the root of the deen is that you what? You give advice. You see somebody about to fall in the hole, that you what? You say something. You see something, say something. But ثم بعد ذلك, somebody would ask, well, how do we reconcile between this and the hadith when the Prophet said, "Min husni Islam al-mar, tarkuhu lima la ya'ni." From the excellent qualities or the excellence of a person's Islam is that he leaves that which does not concern him, that he minds his own business. So how do we reconcile between that and the fact that you're saying that we should give a nasiha? a sister's not wearing hijab properly. A sister is doing this. A brother is doing that. That's their problem. That's their business. What does that have to do with me? In Saudi we say, "Wish the khalq," right? Right? What brought you into this? Okay? What business is it of yours? So is there any contradiction? Do you guys see a contradiction? Is there any contradiction? But there's no contradiction. Because Allah and His Messenger have ordered us to command the good and forbid the evil. We mentioned some of the ayat previously. We also have the hadith of Abu Sa'id al-Khudri, in which the Prophet ﷺ said, he said, "Man ra'a minkum munkaran falyughayyiru biyadihi, فلم يستطيع فبلسانه, فلم يستطيع فبقلبه, وذلك أضعف الإيمان." He said, whoever amongst you sees some evil, something wrong, some evil act, something that's being done that's not correct, let him change it with what? His hand. Physically put a stop to it. And if he can't do that, فبلسانه, then let him say something about it. Give advice. And if he's not able to do that, then what? Then let him change it with what? His heart. Meaning what? Use his relationship. He disassociates himself with what? With the evil thing and the evil doers. وَذَلِكَ أَضْعَفَ الْإِيمَانِ. That's the weakest one. The weakest of faith. The least of faith. So we have this command from the Prophet to what? We see something to what? Say something. To do something. And also, when we see an error, to what? To correct it. So there's no contradiction between minding your own business and saying something when you see something wrong. Why? Because Allah and His Messenger have now made this khata, this mistake that you saw. By you seeing it, Allah and His Messenger have made that what? Made that your business. They made it your business to what? To say something. You have to say something. طيب. ثم بعد ذلك, what about the order that we have, or the instruction that we have, or the encouragement we have in the deen, the encouragement that we have to conceal the faults of others? You know, the deen tells us that when people make a mistake, we're supposed to what? Cover their faults, right? So somebody will say, well, how can you cover their faults if you give them nasiha? If you go up to a person, you tell them, hey man, you did this wrong thing. It's almost like you're doing what? You're exposing. So what you should do, that's what they'll say. You should just turn a blind eye and act like you didn't see it. And that way you'll be what? Covering their faults. So is this true? We have the hadith in which the Prophet said, Man satara musliman satarahu Allah fi dunya wal akhirah. Whoever covers and conceals a Muslim's faults, Allah will cover his faults in this world and the hereafter. So don't you want this, brother? Then when you see somebody do something wrong, just what? Turn the other way. No, ikhwan wa akhawat, there's no contradiction between giving nasiha and doing what? And covering somebody's faults. As long as the person observes certain rules. But the first rule is when he sees the wrong, he realizes he has to eradicate it. Because the Prophet said, if I see something, I'm able to do something, I have to what? I have to eradicate it. In accordance with what? My ability. As the Prophet said in the hadith of Abi Sa'id. And this includes what? One of the ways to eradicate is by giving advice. Alright? And there's no contradiction between advising and concealing, because advice is one thing and exposing is something else. Just because I advise you doesn't mean I've exposed you. Next thing. When a Muslim advises his brother and corrects his behavior, he should do it what? In private. And if he does it in private, there's no crowd. Yeah, there's no crowd. No one has been exposed. It's just what? Advice. It's not fadiha. It's not exposing. You're not exposing anyone because what? You're advising them in secret. But once he's advised them in secret, he can't then after that speak about the fault to what? To others. Or share the advice he gave to what? To others. As long as he advises them secretly and doesn't advise them publicly, or share the advice afterwards with others, or share the fault with others, then he's done what? He's advised and concealed fi waqti nafsi. Right? At the same time. طيب. I'm gonna close by saying this. It's not uncommon, especially in our times, it's quite common, I should say, for advice to be ill-received. People react differently. Everybody's different the way they react. But in most cases, they don't appreciate being told they are wrong. To have that they've done something wrong. Or are otherwise in error. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Quran that in order for us to attain salvation, we need to foster an atmosphere of mutual advice, counseling, and correction in our communities. Allah says, وَالْعَصْرِ إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ لَفِي خُسْرٍ. He says, by the time, man is in a state of loss. Except those who do what? Who do these four things. And one of them is what? وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْحَقِّ. They mutually remind each other, encourage each other, counsel each other with the truth. They give what? Mutual advice. And he said this is what's going to cause them to be what? Saved. So he tells us we have to foster this. We have to create this atmosphere where we're always what? Advising or being advised. And we readily accept advice and criticism. We have to foster this environment. In an environment like that, what do you think happens to the people? When you have this environment where people are always what? Advising and being advised, people that readily accept constructive criticism and advice, people do what? They gradually, they improve. They get better. They get better every day, and with every advice and with every reminder they get better. They become better Muslims. And this was the atmosphere that the Prophet ﷺ fostered amongst his companions. And that's why they were always getting what? Better, becoming more knowledgeable and more committed Muslims. They were always on the uptick. Every day, they were better than they were the day before. Nowadays, the environment is very different. People don't feel comfortable advising others. Even their own wives, children, their close relatives and friends. They feel a great deal of anxiety and are very concerned about how the ones they advise will react. They fear, and with good reason, that the one advised will become belligerent, say or do hurtful things. And for most people in that case, advising is just not worth, it's just not worth what? It's not worth the hassle, it's not worth the headache. I'm trying to help this person out and they're going to get mad? Oh, forget it then. That's what most people will do. That's why you don't have that atmosphere nowadays that they had in the time of the Prophet ﷺ. You also have the phenomenon, there's another phenomenon. So you have the phenomenon of the belligerent one. Who, every time you tell them anything, no matter how nice you say it, right? They're going to get mad. It's going to be an argument. They're going to say and do something hurtful. You got that phenomenon. You got another phenomenon. The phenomenon of what? Of willful disregard and feigned forgetfulness. And this is where people, they do what? When you advise them, they sit what? They sit quietly. They don't become belligerent. They don't get upset. And they have this blank expression. And they pretend to listen to the advice being offered, while in reality, they've what? They've tuned you out. It's just like this. This is their view. I'm going to give you their view of the advisor. This is their view of the advisor. There's no sound. They don't hear anything because they've what? They've tuned you out. I'm not listening. I'm pretending to listen. Okay? Waiting for you to say something which tells me what?
Turn on.
I can turn it back on again. I can turn the volume on again. But right now, I've muted you. Right? Because I don't want to hear the advice at all. So once you stop talking or you leave that person alone, then they do what? They go about their business and do whatever. But then what's going to happen? The advisor is going to see you do that same thing after they what? Spoke with you. And that advisor, because they care, they're going to do what? They're going to reiterate. And that person is going to do what? Tune them out. And then that person's going to do it again. And they're going to what? Tune them out. And then when that keeps happening and happening and happening, and that person keeps offering these flimsy excuses or whatever for their behavior, then what happens? The advisor gets tired of what? Repeating himself. Deems the person a lost cause and gives up, leaving the one advised to do as they what? Do as you like. Whatever. Whatever. This is one of the main reasons why the quality of our Islamic practice is much poorer than that of the companions of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the early Muslims. Because we don't advise each other, and when we do advise, that advice is greeted with either anger and aggression or simply disregarded. I just what? I mute you until you stop talking. We are poor excuses for Muslims because we don't advise and we don't accept advice when it's given. Brothers and sisters, I want you to think about something. Every day you stand up and you pray. At least 17 times a day, you ask Allah for something. You ask Allah for something. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم. Oh Allah, guide us to the straight path, the path of those you have favored. You're asking Him for this. And when He responds to you, He responds in different ways. One of the ways He responds is by sending someone to do what? To advise you. That's one of the ways He guides you. And that advice might come in the form of a husband, a wife, a parent, a child. A child might advise you. Imams on the minbar, teachers in a class like this, and fellow Muslims in the community, whether they're more knowledgeable or less knowledgeable than you are. But what are we doing with that guidance when it comes? What are we doing with it? Why are we asking for something we truly don't want? And what is going to be the consequence of asking to be guided by Allah, receiving the guidance, and then what? Disregarding it, rejecting it. What's going to be the consequence? What's going to be the consequence? You know what was the consequence for the Yahud? When they did that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned the Yahud. And He said, وَكَانُوا يَسْتَفْتِحُونَ عَلَى الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا فَلَمَّا جَاءَهُمْ مَا عَرَفُوا كَفَرُوا بِهِ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَلَعْنَةُ اللَّهِ عَلَى الْكَافِرِينَ. He says the Jews, they used to what? They used to pray for something. They wanted a messenger that would come, that would revive their deen, lead them out of the darkness into the light, and lead them into battle against what? The polytheists, the pagans. So Allah sent one. They've been praying for it. And Allah sent one. But that messenger didn't share their ethnicity. Didn't look like them. And didn't share their ethnicity. And they didn't like that. That's what we wanted, a Jewish prophet. We didn't want an Arab prophet. So they rejected him. And you know what Allah said? فَلَعْنَةُ اللَّهِ الْكَافِرِينَ. May the curse of Allah be upon those who what? Who reject it. Yeah, Juan, you know what insanity is? Insanity is when you do the same thing, but you expect different results. We gotta stop asking for Allah's guidance and then do what? Get the guidance and what? And reject it. We gotta stop being those people. Because today we're in the dunya, living it up, and tomorrow you're on the plane of judgment, facing Allah. And what did you do with the guidance I sent you? What did you do with my messengers? How did you respond to my messengers and to my guidance? We need to be the people who create that environment where people feel comfortable advising us. And when they advise us, we readily accept that advice. It's for our benefit. It's for our sake. The advisor has nothing what? He has something to gain, but not like what we're going to gain. So I just wanted to point that out, Juan, because it's a big problem in the Muslim community, not just here, but everywhere. And generally speaking, people just don't. They don't advise. It's a lost it's a lost value. Because people just don't want to be shouted at. People don't want to find their advice disregarded. So people don't advise. And then when people get advised, they just what? They blow it off. Just want to mention that. Any questions, any comments, any complaints, any critiques?
I have a small question, if you don't mind. Sometimes I get a choice, and through experience, basically, I know if I advise this person, he's not going to say too much, but this will be the end of him coming to the mosque. Maybe it's the first visit, and see him understand like a monk, worse than a monk, up and down, and
Subhanallah.
This was supposed to be salah.
Mm-hmm.
And if I talk to him, he understands that I think this will be the end of it.
Hey.
I don't think he will come back to the masjid. Doesn't matter how sweet, how much you
Subhanallah.
understand rice pudding or icing on the cake I do it. I know for sure that he's not going to come back to the masjid.
Subhanallah.
So I said, maybe give him a couple of months more until
Hey.
he understand. Or, what do you think about this?
Wallahi, if you have strong reason to believe, and it's not uncommon, that if you advise a person, first visit, second visit, about something, that because of the circumstances that you're aware of, because of your wisdom and your knowledge and your experience, that if I were to advise this person, or a person from this background, or a person from this group, or this way of thinking, if I advise that person, their reaction is going to be like this. If you have reason to believe that. But if I took a more diplomatic approach, and I give him time, I keep inviting him to come to the masjid, to come to classes, and I can advise him around the way. And the ikhwan, advice doesn't have to be what? Be tariqa mubashara. It doesn't have to be what? Direct. Sometimes you do it what? Indirectly. You feel like I can't sit this person down and just tell them. So I do it what? Indirectly. You follow me? So there's no harm if you take that approach. As long as you're committed to what? To advising, you just know that I can't be direct with this person. Because at the end of the day, what we want to achieve is what? Presenting the advice in the most palatable way for the person receiving it, giving him no reason to what? To reject it. That's what we ultimately want to achieve. So if you feel like the best way to do that is to give him time, then there's no harm in that. But I think I want to add something to something I said earlier, and that's this. I want everybody to reflect on something. You don't have to do it here and now, but sometime tonight, I just want you to reflect on something. Ask yourself this question. Am I a better Muslim today than I was yesterday? Have I learned more about the deen? Have I made more dhikr? Have I made more salah? Have I done something for Allah today that I didn't do yesterday? Do I feel like gradually, day by day, I'm drawing closer to Allah and becoming a better Muslim? I'm improving. Even if it's incremental, small steps, baby steps, but I'm what? I'm moving in the right... I'm not stagnating, or even worse, regressing. Ask yourself that. Sit by yourself and ask yourself that question. If you can't answer that question with yes, what are you doing? What are you doing? Then on top of that, somebody comes and they advise you, trying to help you what? Kickstart you. And you get mad. Or you make them feel like, I can't tell this person anything. I'm like, what are we doing? Why are we Muslim? Is it a game? Is it a joke? It ain't a joke. It's not even a deen. It's not even a religion. It's a way of life. You live and breathe being Muslim. It's not a culture. It's not certain things I pick and choose. I like that. You know what I mean? I like that. I like the way they do that. How do they put that red in their beard? I like the way they do that. So I do that. As if the red... I mean, come on, man. This is a little marginal thing compared to what? The other things that are more important than deen. But that's what you find people putting a great deal of emphasis on things like this. And as far as trying to get better and be a better Muslim and to be a servant of Allah, which we're created to do, that's not where we're at. So I just want to point that out. And nasiha is critical in that. It's critical. It's here to make us better. And I also want to say, it annoys me, and I'm not going to call any names. It annoys me when people come and they're busy on the phone. Tell whoever it is, I'm in class trying to learn my deen where you should be. I'm just putting that out there. هذا وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على محمد. Who's got a question? تفضلي. I'm sorry, I didn't know you had a question.
With the advice, like you said, like when you said, oh, sister Smith's coming to marry your brothers, there's some, and they actually ask for advice. In a situation like this, what if a brother or a sister comes and they specifically go to the person's ex and ask them for advice? And more than likely, the ex is going to be biased. Even if they have something that is important, or even if they do have something that might be to warn them, and the other person asks, like, should they give the advice or should they tell them to seek other because they know they're going to be biased?
Okay, I'll make sure I understand your question. There's a person who is seeking advice about a person. Should that person go to that person's ex?
No, not should. They did.
Okay, they did.
They
And now should they accept that advice? You're saying should they accept it?
Should the ex answer? Should they
Is
give
the ex
advice?
obligated to give that?
Okay, I see what you're saying.
The ex is going to be biased.
Mm-hmm.
But the ex knows they're going to be biased.
And
So should the ex leave it and tell them to seek advice through another way? Because they know they're going to be biased, even though they do have, like, information.
mm-hmm.
That means you go to avoid him.
I got it.
Give the advice, or should they tell them to seek it another way?
Well, again, it won't be advice. Remember what we said about the linguistic meaning of advice. It won't be advice if there's treachery. And bias is a part of treachery. So it wouldn't be sincere advice. So if the person knows about themselves, I can't be impartial. I can't be fair. I can't be objective. Whatever I say is going to be highly subjective. And I won't be fair. Then yeah, they would refrain because they can't be fair. They would refrain on that basis. That base, I know I couldn't tell you the truth. I couldn't be honest. But if they know about themselves, I can be objective. I can say the good and I can say the bad. I can be fair. And there are some people who can't be fair. I don't believe that there's no people. It might be something which is rare, but it's not something which is non-existent. There are people who can be fair when they talk about their ex-wife or ex-husband. So the person knows that they can be fair, and they can say, yeah, this person has, X, Y, and Z good quality, but our problem was this, okay? And my role in that was this. It wasn't all on him or all was all on her. If they can actually say that, then that person can, offer their advice. I wouldn't advise anybody to go to the ex for the reason that you mentioned. But if they did go, then that ex will be obligated to either be fair or be quiet. Yeah.
And if they know they can be fair?
If they know they can?
They know they can be fair, but they choose to cover their ex's fault. Like, is there any sin on them?
Yeah, because the Prophet said, إِذَا اسْتَنْصَحَكَ فَانْصَحْهُ. If he seeks your advice and advise him, and that's going to be, unless you have a legitimate excuse to abstain, and definitely not being able to be fair would be a legitimate excuse. But no, I know I can be fair, but still I'm not going to tell you anything. What do you mean? I need to make an educated decision about this, and you're probably the best person to offer the advice.
The sister did not choose somebody else. She chose the ex because she knows he or she are the best one. They've been involved, ate from the same plate, and she's the best one can give her, or he's the best one that can give her the information. So she's obligated, is it?
I just said she's obligated. I just said that. I swear I just said that. I swear I did. Play it back. Play it back. I just said that. But I will say this, like I said, I wouldn't advise for the reason that you mentioned. I wouldn't advise somebody going to someone's ex. I wouldn't advise them. Find out the information from other means. But suppose there was no other means except the ex, then yeah, that would be a reason. Yeah, I'm forced. Muttar. I have to go. So now if I go and ask the ex and the ex is able to be fair, give me the information. Make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense.
Atfadali.
Alright. As far as like the person who's approaching giving the
Getting
advice,
spice now.
if they know that, say you know the person who you might have seen doing something wrong,
Uh-huh.
but you know that that person might not receive the advice well from you, and not in the intention of backbiting, but you know somebody close to them, is it permissible to tell the person who's close to them so that maybe they can have the conversation with the person? Or would that be considered backbiting? I mean, if they're only interested to do it, because some people receive information better from other people, you know?
Like when the scholars of Islam talk about backbiting, they mention about 6 categories or 6 instances when a person does what on the face of it is backbiting, but it's an exception to the rule. One of the exceptions to the rule is when you tell someone who's able to rectify a problem. You're not in a position to solve it yourself. So you tell someone who's able to rectify it. Because what? They're the only bridge, they're the only means to achieve the end. That's not considered backbiting. And it's not considered exposing it. And they use for a proof for that the hadith of what's the wife of Abu Sufyan? Hind, the hadith of Hind. That she went to the Prophet ﷺ and she said that Abu Sufyan is a stingy man and he doesn't spend upon me and my children. So is it alright if I take from his wealth that which suffices me and my children? So now notice, this is a fault that Abu Sufyan has. And now she's going to the Prophet and she's told him. On the surface, what do we call that?
Stealing?
No, we call it backbiting. If I say something, you have a fault, stealing, he said. When Hind went and told, she hadn't taken anything yet. All right, so she went to the Prophet ﷺ.
She was asking permission to steal.
Well, technically it wasn't stealing though. But at any rate, all these semantics and technicalities, that's beside the point. But at any rate, went to the Prophet ﷺ, and now she told him about a fault that Abu Sufyan had. On the surface, we call that backbiting. But she did it because the Prophet was able to do what? To solve the problem. Either the Prophet could tell her, you know what you could do? You could just take from his wealth, secretly, that which is enough for you and your children. That would be a solution. Or the Prophet say, you know what? I'll summon him, I'll talk to him, and he'll get it together. The Prophet could do what, though? He could solve it. So if, for this, and what you said is something that's, it's very pertinent. It happens. And sometimes you don't have a good relationship with someone, or when you say it, they always take it the wrong way. They get offensive. So, or they go on the defensive. So, they get offended, or they go on the defensive. But you know that if this person tells them, they're more likely to what? To swallow it, to accept it. So there's no harm if you go to that person, because they're more likely to have success, and you only do it for that purpose, because they're a means to the end. At the end of the day, we just want this person to be guided aright. So yeah, that wouldn't be considered backbiting for the same reason it wasn't backbiting when Hind went to the Prophet ﷺ. But we need to make sure though, or we need to have we need to be confident that that person really can what? Can solve the problem. Because what we don't want to do is go around telling people who can't solve it, and then in effect we're doing what? We're backbiting and exposing the person's fault. Does that make sense? Like Fishay? Anything? هذا وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين.